Hello and welcome to the video. Today I'm going to be bringing you along as I make one of my signature series, magic wands. As you can see here, I'm finding the center of my dowel, which is not too hard to do with these square dowels. Now we're going to go ahead and start rounding off a piece of wood that we have selected here, which is actually a very nice piece of poplar. Poplar is one of my favorite materials to use whenever it comes to woodworking. It's a very soft wood, very soft and easily worked material. Now that we pretty much have everything rounded off, we're going to go ahead and start forming the body of the magic wand. This is probably one of my favorite steps in this whole process because you can really start to see the wand start to take shape. Now this next step, I'm going to go ahead and start forming what I like to call the pommel and the handle itself. So unfortunately here, whenever I was forming this decorative end piece, I made it a little bit too thin and I ended up snapping it free. But it's okay, we don't make mistakes here, we just have happy little accidents. I was actually quite confused at this point as to how this managed to stay on the lathe. Now that we have everything remounted, we're continuing on, and I'm not really worried about where it broke because I had planned on putting a decorative end piece on this magic wand, and so it's not really that big of a deal. Now we're going to go ahead and move on into the next phase of this, which is refining the main body of the wand. We're just going to hit it with a little bit of sandpaper, make sure everything down here at the end of the handle looks nice. And now we're up here and we're going to start working the body of the wand. Now at this stage of the process, you can see here that I have my hand on the body of the wand, and that's because things start to get very thin here, and if you gouge into the wood just a little bit too much, it could cause it to snap free like it did earlier. So you can see here I'm being very slow and very careful. So here I'm hitting this with some 240 grit sandpaper just to kind of smooth things out so that I can actually draw on my pattern that I'm planning for carving into this. This is where things start to get really interesting, and you can really start to get creative with what you want your wand to end up looking like. So unfortunately here, I ended up losing a little bit of footage because my camera died. You can see that little bit of a skip there. And I've already got some of the details carved in along with my final shaping of the wand. But this is actually a custom little bit that I made. It's simply just a washer that I had sharpened the ends of and added in a few little teeth into it so that it really digs into the wood and I can apply this really interesting pattern into the grain itself. So here in this next section, I was having a really hard time keeping the cord from my rotary tool from hitting my camera. As you can see there, my camera's kind of bouncing around and shaking around a lot, but I'm just going ahead and I'm adding the holes into these knots that I left in my pattern. Because I really wanted it to look like this was something that had just been broken off of a tree, more or less. And these were rotten holes from old limbs. So as you can see here, there's a lot of chipping and gouging that was going on. So I'm going ahead and hitting this with some more of that 240 grit sandpaper just to really try and refine my edges and get things really honed down to where I want them to be. Here I'm using a 340 grit diamond bit to add some fancy texture into the handle because I thought it looked a little bit plain and I really wanted there to be some nice contrast between the body of the wand and the handle. And here you can see me actually adding a little bit more texture and design to the very base of this piece. So I didn't actually like the length of this wand. I thought it was a little bit too long. So I decided to take my skew chisel here and just kind of take it down a little bit. And here I'm hitting it with a little bit more sandpaper, just kind of trying to get my final shape that I really wanted. And so I'm just working that in a little bit, and it really started to look good. So I'm just going ahead and hitting it with some more of that 240 grit and just kind of really bringing things to a nice finish. And I'll be finishing this off later, going all the way up to a 600 to 800 grit. So here in this next section, we're going to be adding that decorative base to the pommel like I was talking about earlier. Now as you see here, I actually decided to burn or scorch that texture a little bit just to take some of the hairs off of it. So this is probably one of the most satisfying steps in this entire process. Here, I'm just adding some black leather dye just to add a little bit more contrast to the handle section of this piece. So now I'm adding my final finish to this piece, and it is actually a mixture of oil paint and Danish oil. And I found that you have basically unlimited possibilities with colors and ratios whenever it comes to this type of finish. I really like to use this dark brown finish because it really seeps deep into the wood and makes the grain pop a lot, as you'll see here shortly.